And now we have the next developer is Eivar from Lienzo, from Mexico, and they developed Mulaka, that is a very interesting game related to the culture of the tribe of, you say the name?
Yeah. Hello.
Tarahumara?
Hello, my name is Alan.
No, say they are going to play the video, then you do the intro.
Oh, all right.
Play Mulaka is
Hello, Jesus. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the organizers and thank you for the for everything. I'm so happy. As Jesus said, I'm from Mexico. We have taken the Tarahumara culture, their tradition, their stories, their combat into this game. It goes about 2 years ago. We started in 2016. We have launched the game 4 months ago, and we are still pushing the game in conferences with the press, and also the maintenance of the books, obviously. But yeah, that is the game. Sorry for my poor English, but I will do my best.
And now we have Rocío Blanco from Bolivia. She's going to talk in Spanish, very like slowly, despacito.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Rocío.
Anata Carnival. They develop a game based on the popular dancers or traditional dancers of Bolivia.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es Rocío Blanco, soy desarrolladora. Actualmente estoy en el equipo de programación de Xiara Studios. Anata Carnival es un videojuego 2D disponible en plataformas móviles basado en los juegos de pelea de los 90. Difunde las danzas folclóricas y sitios turísticos de mi país, usando la gamificación para este fin.
Gracias. So now we have Eivar Rojas from Colombia. They have a game called The Coherence, and his studio is called Efecto Studios. The Coherence.
Hello everyone, my name is Eivar Rojas. I'm co-founder of Efecto Studios. Efecto Studios, it's focused on development for PC and console. We have released several projects in the past, like a Lucha Libre game and Chavez card game for console. I'm really happy to share with you our experience. Mostly, The Coherence is a good reference, but Chavez card, I think, is perfect example of how we took the Mexican culture and implemented into a video game based on the Mario Kart game. So, thank you.
Carlos Martín.
Hello. Hola, ¿cómo están todos? No puedo hablar portugués. I'm going to speak in English because it's a more comfortable language for me. My name is Carlos Martin. I own a management company called Seat 7 Entertainment LLC. This company provides management services for mid-sized and independent game developers based out of the San Francisco Bay Area. And what I do is I help independent game developers find publishing, financing, distribution for their titles. Recent releases that we've worked on include The Walking Dead Collection, which was a game that was remastered by Client Fun Labs based out of Romania for Telltale Games. And we have a couple other titles announced, including a title called Head Snatchers by Iguanavi. What else has been announced? Eternity by Void Studios here in Brazil. And not sure what else. My background, I've worked for game publishers for about 20 years now, including Sony, Bandai Namco, and Activision. I'm also an attorney in the state of California, so been doing a lot of stuff in design, production, business, and to a certain extent legal.
So now we know a little bit of each one. I'm going to ask you the first question. Basically, when you create a game, you have different choices, creative choices, and inspirations. We have here people, developers, who created games based on something that was established, maybe history, maybe culture, maybe traditions. And my first question is, for each one of you, try to be short so we all can talk. How did you find the inspiration, the first inspiration to create your game, and why?
Right. So when we were making Dandara, I even talked yesterday about that in another talk. We started by our like inspiration that comes from the games we played. So we were like making game like the idea of the narrative was very similar to what other games do. So it was like this guy shooting with a machine gun and like a military base or something like that. Because it's a game focused on the mechanics, right? And we didn't worry so much. And then we realized that it was very cheap. We were just like getting, it wasn't very inspired actually. It was just like making what came in the, like what came first in our mind. So we thought that we should maybe look for ourselves and like the culture, like our culture, and it's not a very military culture, the Brazilian one, and we don't have like contact with like weapons and things like that, and we thought that it would be like a lot harder to make a game about that, and we should like just seek for inspiration in something that is closer. So we started looking for the things we learn and at school, or like the things that we see at museums that are in our town, and like places that we go, and that's how like we came from a narrative that was uninspired to something that it was like, I believe, a lot more interesting, inspired in Dandara dos Palmares. And not only that, but like we got inspiration from our city and the places that are around us, and we are closer to those, so we got a lot of more ideas, and I think it makes it a lot better. So
it's very interesting because it's something that wasn't your culture. So the inspiration, the creative inspiration was something that you researched, and with this.
Yeah. We started thinking about like so the subjects and the conflicts that Brazil had, and we came to slavery, and through the research we met the Dandara dos Palmares, which is a real person that existed, and so she became the inspiration. After that, we changed the story. We did something more that had more to do with the mechanics as well, because it's a very floating mechanic. It's not very realistic, and so we changed it to something closer to us, but still, like, now it was more inspired, and like we learned that getting the inspiration from closer to us make things actually easier and more interesting, because now like it's easier to convey a feeling of being somewhere that you know how it feels than like getting another place or another culture and make a feeling through that, like you've never been there, right?
When the first time I saw Dandara, I wasn't able to identify the culture because Dandara dos Palmares is not so popular. But I want to ask Eivar, in your case, we can see, or I think more people can see, that you are talking about tribes from Mexico or indigenous people. I think it's something that, I don't know, I want to, you both, but if you want to add something else afterwards, you feel free. Who here from the audience noticed the country where the game was? Like, I want you to raise your hand if you notice that the second game, Mulaca, could be from Mexico. Could be. And who could guess that Dandara was from Brazil? Somebody? Why? I want to know. Sorry.
Because of the name of the main character?
Because you researched maybe about the culture and you knew that there was a character called Dandara, right? Beforehand. but it's not very popular. And this is something very, very interesting, that some developers don't need to go for the easy way of, okay, like tacos in Mexico. They go and dive into legends or kind of traditions that the common audience don't know. And I find this very, very interesting, because you don't need to create this match. Sometimes it can be a good game, and then you can get people interested about the culture afterwards, I think. And Ever, what do you think?
Yeah, the Tarahumara culture and native people live together with us in the cities, and they wearing their original clothes, and but most of the people don't know who are they. We did research into the La Xiara to know more about them. We noticed that they have amazing stories and myths, original materials to put into gameplay, into great mechanics, and we took an advantage for that reason into the game.
Also, you got really connected with the real tribe, with the indigenous. You are helping them.
Yeah, the game is 100% based on the Tarahumara. We respect all the customs because we request permission for them about the game, but they are agreeing about it.
Rocío. La pregunta es, ¿cómo influenció la cultura el desarrollo del juego desde el primer momento? O sea, ¿cómo encontraste la inspiración para hacer el juego, o encontrasteis la inspiración para hacer el juego, y cómo se fue desarrollando, ¿no? Como el origen.
Ok. Voy a hablar despacito. En Bolivia, diariamente se hacen bailes. Hay más de 370 acontecimientos en el transcurso del año. Siempre se baila morenada, caporales, tinku, es de las danzas más conocidas en la región. Diablada, que es como el core del juego. Los orígenes de las danzas son de estilo colonial, cuando ha sido invadida el área de los urus por los españoles, ha ayudado bastante a enriquecer nuestra tradición. Entonces, de hecho, la base para crear nuestro juego eran más los trajes típicos y los pasos originales de las danzas. Eso ha ayudado a enriquecer bastante nuestro juego.
Eivar.
Well, in our case, it's been like the opposite way, because Decoherence is not like a cultural video game from Colombia. But something that I can add is how not just Colombia, how Latin America has a big potential to disrupt the video games industry, because for a good reason we are aligned with North American consumers, I mean Canadian, United States, and because we are aligned with the same TV shows, with the same movies, with the same context to produce new content, and how we're able to change a little bit the approach to generate the products, and how the culture let us cross the borders and have new ideas about the same game structure, because we're not doing new game mechanics. At the end, it's just a mix of the traditional mechanics but adding this new point of view in a video game let us open a big opportunity in the market. And actually, one of the biggest opportunities is how to present some values that we have in our culture transformed to the North American audience. With Lucha Libre, when we released Lucha Libre in 2010 with Konami in the States, it was really interesting because the people used to consider the wrestling as a traditional sport in the States, but few people knew that Lucha Libre came way time before the wrestling in the States. But it was really interesting how the culture could go and change the perspective in some people, not in all people. But in some people, it changed the perspective of how they consider something that was wrestling, but originally was Lucha Libre. So it's really interesting to change that perspective.
I think also it's worth noticing that the Coherence is a game that uses culture as a tool. You use it because it's a culture that allows you to develop your idea and your gameplay. And in the other cases, I think the culture was there as a motivation to show or depict a story or to defend or to teach, to put some values or to put some relevance in the history. But in your case, it's more like a layer you put afterwards, because I don't know if the first prototype of this game was about Pre-Columbine and Art Deco. No?
Well, actually, when the project started, it started like an average project. Like it's a strategy game that almost all the strategy game has the same structure. But once we find out that we need to move away of the high-tech video games, we need to point in a way different direction. That's why we grab Art Nouveau as a base component, as a base art direction, in order to differentiate the game against other games. And the second big point that actually that is a really personal perspective is that the pre-Columbian story was connected with all the animals and the gold work the Indians made. That's why everything is really well connected with Art Nouveau, but as well all the use of gold to create these weapons was very well used in the pre-Columbian time. So it was a good opportunity to connect both. It's not that explicitly about that, but internally it's the best reference for us.
And Carlos is not an indie developer, is exactly like from another ecosystem that is a publishing, and also you come from the AAA industry, right? Mostly. Most of your careers has been there. So I'm sure you got a lot of pitches of indie games with a cultural background or heavy cultural influences. I would like to know, as you have been doing this for a while, how much the cultural aspect has been important for you when taking decisions like we invest, we publish, we only do some consultancy, or we don't do nothing with this project. How you look at this aspect of the games?
Well, it's interesting to think about the history of the game development industry, I think, because today we work in a very digital marketplace, and when you have a digital marketplace, you have a very gray boundaries between different countries and different cultures. It didn't used to be that way. Before the advent of digital release, there was a lot more firm boundaries where oftentimes publishers were assigned certain rights to different countries and territories to sell the product. So, you know, you would have a company like, let's say an EA, there'd be an EA North America, which would be publishing games relevant for that market, in Europe, publishing games for that market. And during that era, what I think was interesting is that you really had game developers have an opportunity to really develop a gaming culture that was based around something that was truly organic to that country. So, for example, Eivar made the point that there are cultural sort of thematic differences between a lot of the games, but the mechanics are still in a sense traditional. And I think it's a really good point because, you know, let's just think about let's say the 80s and 90s. There were video games being developed in Japan. Many of them were just for the Japanese market, with really no serious thought necessarily about bringing it to the West, unless it was some sort of success. I mean, obviously there's a little bit of, it's not 100% correct. They were clearly bringing titles over to the West, but it was not the priority. It was a incremental opportunity at the time. And what ended up happening is you saw these Japanese game development communities really grow, where games got better and better and better, and soon the ones that were really good, they said, hey, let's try to bring this to the United States. Let's try to bring this to Europe. I mean, that's why today, or whenever, you know, Final Fantasy VI is Final Fantasy III in the United States, because they never brought those over. They wasn't sure if there was going to be a market for it. So today it's a little bit more difficult, I think, for developers in territories that are not, you know, places like the United States or the UK, or, you know, kind of seen as more global places, because, you know, you can't really make games necessarily that's just for a local industry and expect the same kind of attention from certain types of publishers. Not all publishers, but from a lot of publishers, because there's so much competition, so much pressure that they want to see these releases that are going to do really well globally, which makes it hard, because it makes it hard for you to really like develop, I think, that sort of one thing that I think is a real opportunity, again, similar to what Eivar said, is I think there's a real opportunity in Latin America and different parts of the world, like the Middle East and Africa, to really develop not only thematic differences, but gameplay differences, where you're creating a gameplay style that is totally unheard of. Today you have a real-time strategy game that's a very American, right? Like the Westwood games, or you have first-person shooters like the American id games, or you have Japanese hack and slash or RPGs. And so I think there's a real opportunity there. And so when it comes to publishers, I think oftentimes they are looking for differentiating factors. So oftentimes cultural elements could be very strong differentiating factors that can help bring worldwide attention, because it's interesting. People find culture interesting and looking at the world with a different lens. So I think there is something there, but at the same time, publishers are also increasingly thinking more global. They're not necessarily able to sustain a business just with one territory, even a huge territory like the United States. So they have to think, how can we make this as global as possible? And so I think it's a difficult balance that the developers have to think about.
It's tricky. Sometimes a developer, they don't know if they are going to find a market with the Hawaiian culture, or with a new style of gameplay that mixes new aesthetics. But here, there is something very interesting you mentioned, and Eivar mentioned, that's about gameplay, about the whole mechanic. And I want to know, because during the preparation of this panel, we were thinking, if we remove the cultural aspect of the game, it will be the same game in terms of the fun, the mechanics, the flow. And I would like to know if we remove that, or if not, we don't need to remove that. We need to think what has been added to the game during the development, thanks to the cultural impact and the cultural influences. If you can please go, we can start from that part, from the part.
I think it's difficult to say in our case. What we had is, like, after we changed the setting, we had changes in the game design, the gameplay. It's very difficult to say what came because of the cultural side. There are things like from the setting, how the character design is. So, for example, she's humble, and she walks like barefoot, and there are like things on the gameplay that came from that, like her animations and like the animation style changes the speed of the game. So she goes into the doors like very graciously, and gracefully, yeah. And I think that those are changes that happen, and they come to the gameplay, but it's hard to tell which ones came because of the culture and which ones didn't. The setting changed and the gameplay changed, I think.
I think for example, ninjas, Vikings, knights, samurais will never be old-fashioned because the main thing in the video games is the gameplay. Needs to be fun and immersive for the player. For that reason, the skin of the game or theme can be changed. The main thing again is the execution. At the end, it's a game and needs to be funny. Carlos, what do you, what do you
Am I
think?
moderating now? Trying to get the music down.
En Bolivia la gente es se apropia bastante de su cultura. Siempre está la expectativa de si es que vas a cumplir sus expectativas en cuanto a sus creencias básicas. Dentro de lo que es el videojuego, la vestimenta ha sido un factor clave para darle personalidad y forma. También pasos originales de las danzas le han dado personalidad. Como los detalles en cuanto a la ropa de la diablada y los poderes que se le han incluido al fighting game han sido base, ¿no? Sorry, estoy un poco nerviosa.
No te preocupes. Eva?
So I think if we remove the cultural layer to the projects we have been involved, I think it will be really boring because unfortunately or fortunately, we came late to the video game party. I mean, all the industry in Latin America is probably 20 years in terms of experience behind the top industry. But fortunately, that gave us the opportunity to break rules. So because we came late to the party, we have a big gap understanding how Mario Bros. Is transforming all the art direction or establishing the art direction or establishing the game mechanics that let us know where are the blind spots that the game is not covering and is the perfect time to get into, but with new purpose in terms of mechanics. And in terms of art, something that is really interesting, and I'm really sure that is happening here in Brazil, is that the pool of artists in art is so big that it's really easy to find good artists doing generating new point of views of the same art we have been working with. So the talent is everywhere in Latin America. It's really easy to find really good people, even without experience working in video games. They have the minimum talent and the best context to produce new content. So it's extremely important that the culture let us cross the borders and break the rules and have new ways to do the same game structures.
I'm curious about how your game has been received in your own countries, in your own audience. Because, well, I think, we have every of the games here that are here used cultural influences from the countries of their developers. So we don't have here anybody from Brazil trying to make a Japanese game. So, and it's not in the Japanese culture. So you are from the same culture of the audience that of your country that is going to play your game, and maybe you are closer to them because they are in the same society. I'm curious about what was the feedback and the opinions that you got from your vision of the game when your community, when your the people that are in your society played your game.
Okay, I think it's for us it's a bit different. Like Eivar, it's from his country, but it's a different culture, right? So you went to like research the culture, and in Dandara we tried to add elements that came from our background. So it's more like looking for inspiration closer to us than looking for inspiration in other cultures. And we just we tried to make it more natural, like something like being creative from something new, because it's closer to us, and you know there are not so many games that come from Belo Horizonte. So if you put something there that is from Belo Horizonte, is already new in the gaming industry. You asked about the reception and well, for Dandara it was good. We had a good reception, and it's common in Brazil. People complain if you make something about favela or about Rio, it's always like favela or Rio or soccer, and Dandara is not about that. But there are some references there, and I think what changes is when you make something about that, or something that just has that as an element. It happens in the favela, but it's not about the favela. It's another story, and it's an interesting story. People will like it. I'm sure if you ask many people which are the best movies in Brazil, they are both in favela, City of Gods or Elite Troop. So I think it's that's the thing, if it's about that or not. So there is this bad reception sometimes, but we didn't get that, so it was good.
We have 6
We have
minutes.
questions. Yeah, we have questions from the audience if you'd like to answer.
We have questions. I think it's good if we do a quick answer, 1 minute answer from each one of you, so everybody has the chance to answer the last.
Okay.
If you can answer very fast, so we can have the questions. Ever? Feedback from the Mexican people when they played Mulaka, in very short words.
When we started this project, we have no idea, we have no game, we have nothing. But we went to the events, we talked with the investors, with the players, and we noticed the cultural game, in this case, Taramaro culture, liked the script that we talk, and my message for you is you don't need to have an entire project to sell a possible investor or publisher. You have to get an idea and a success and a script. Excuse me.
Script. Rocío, ¿cómo ha sido la recepción de Anata Carnival en Bolivia?
Pues la expectativa ha sido bastante alta, de hecho porque el primer tráiler que hemos realizado ha sido más una experiencia como todos pensaban que era más real, no en un 2D. Entonces la expectativa ha bajado un poco, pero hemos compensado bastante bien con los pasos que se han ido reflejando. Ha sido bastante divertido la realización con las tradiciones, porque el mezclar una cultura como de tiempos de colonización y las costumbres en allá son ritos ancestrales que se remontan desde hace años. Tienen una costumbre allá que es de rendirle tributo al tío. Es un dios que para ellos es el creador de todo lo que ahora vemos. Lo hemos puesto en la historia de los jugadores, mezclando un poco de fantasía y realidad. Entonces, sí hemos alcanzado a cumplir las expectativas de las personas.
Okay, in our case, when we had the opportunity to work with Chavo, it was really interesting how Mexico in the 70s spread this IP around Latin America, and we were lucky to participate in the development. But the only issue was the perspective from the publisher, because they were targeting to release the game for the kids that were watching the cartoon version of Chavo. But for the project was lucky because the people that buys the project was the people like us that used to watch like the real people show, because it connects directly with that moment of our childhood. So we receive a lot of good comments because we have the real voices from the actors, some of them, and it was great because it connects really easy for them.
You have time for one question?
Yeah, we have 1 minute. I don't think we have, but quick one. Do you think that putting distinct cultural traits in your game may alienate players from other countries that are not familiar with the culture? But like, we have 1 minute to answer.
Let me take that. Actually, it's way easier when you do something out of your country than inside of the country, because for some reason, I don't know if that happens in Brazil, but in Colombia, being really well known because you did a really good job using cultural elements from the same country is really hard, because at the end the people has this preconception of what they're seeing, but the people out of the country really wanted to know about that. So the real opportunity is trying to expand the borders of the culture, trying to avoid being so specific with some specific cultural rules that help you to let people dig into your culture, like the Japanese culture. Probably a lot of people haven't been in Japan, but I'm really sure all of us knows a little bit about Japanese culture, so I think that's the approach.
When I add, okay.
I would actually say a lot of companies do a lot of business doing exactly that. Look at Disney, for example. It's not necessarily a gaming company, but a big part of their business model is finding IPs that originated in other cultures and bringing them to the United States. You know, you have properties like Aladdin, The Jungle Book, any number of different, Coco. Yeah, and so you have, I think, the question I think is also just, when you see that sort of cultural integration, what aspects do you bring in? You know, obviously with different cultures, there's going to be aspects that are, more embraced than others. So I think it's just about being careful about what content that you bring in and bringing over the content that I think the audience you're going after is going to be excited about, that's going to appreciate it.
Ok, nosso tempo acabou, our time is over. Obrigado, pessoal, obrigado, palmas para eles. E a gente daqui a pouco tem mais um painel, só peço...